Welcome to class. I'm Beth the Baker. I was a pastry chef for 11 years, and I'm going to teach you some stuff about baking. Elevation can very much affect baking. What I mean by elevation, I am near Denver, so I don't know how tall, how elevated? I don't know what the elevation is where I live. I used to live at a very high elevation, close to like 8,000 feet. Now I live a little bit less than that. Karen. There are many ways in which elevation can affect baking and cooking. And kitties, apparently. Okay. So like every year my dad goes to Copper with his friends and they always burn the bacon. So when you're cooking at home, you cook bacon at, I don't eat meat, but like 475, I think. For I don't know how long. If you do that here, you'll burn it. So you kind of have to lower the temp and the time because of something with the barometric pressure. Stuff cooks more quickly, and if you do it at a normal heat that you would do at sea level, it just doesn't cook the same. So there's a lot more of that with baking. So the things that are impacted with baking at elevation, which, like I said, when I mean elevation, I just mean anything above sea level. There's some sort of chart somewhere that will tell you exactly, like, when you are at 4,000 feet, you need to change the water by this much, and the fat by this much, and the eggs by this much, and the leaveners like baking soda, baking powder by this much. I've never really had success with that. You kind of have to just figure it out by yourself. When I was closer to 8,000 feet, I always cut the baking soda and the baking powder in half. Every single time. Every recipe I was looking at, cut it in half. When you get a baking mix, like a brownie mix, a lot of times it will say on the back, for elevation, add half a cup of flour, because when you are making things at 8,000 feet from a mix, or like buying frozen cookie dough from the store and you bake it, it just splooshes. It's just like a full sploosh, kind of like the cookies from my last video. You have to add more flour than you normally would. I also add cornstarch to my cookies. I think that really helps with not only it holding together and being like a thicker cookie, but also the texture. So there's that. You can put too much fat in things at elevation. I don't know, I can't remember the science. It's been too many years since I went to culinary school and they taught us all of this. I never thought I'd be living in elevation then, so I didn't really pay attention. Classic me. And a lot of times there's too much fat in recipes. When I'm baking something that is a recipe from like Half Baked Harvest or something like that, she has a delicious lemon blueberry bread that I used to make years ago. I had to cut down the butter and the oil that was in that recipe because it was like a soggy, buttery mess. So I cut down the butter, I halved the baking soda and the baking powder, and I increased the flour. So like with bread making, if you're doing at sea level, I used to be a bread baker at sea level, and then I started baking bread at high elevation. At sea level, you could do a bread that was 60% hydration, and that was like a wet dough, like almost hard, like almost like ciabatta, which is usually 110%, but a wet sourdough, which I know I'm saying wet, that's just like what you say about bread. 60% was wet. At high elevation, 80% was about the same texture and feel from the same dough, from the same recipe, but you had to increase the water by 20% to get it to perform the way that it did at sea level. So there's so many things about baking at elevation that really make no sense. Hopefully I answered some of your questions. If you have any more, I'd love to share the baking knowledge and can have a class.